Good morning. It's Tuesday again. Boy, do weeks pass quickly. We've had snow here this week. We've had rain. We've had wind. We've had sunshine even. And it's just been a week since I spoke to you last time. This week I've been really challenged about serving, about servitude. I've been talking to you for the last couple of weeks about it. And I read this week a story again about a girl who was willing to serve. We know the story from the book of Ruth, and as I've read it, I've been thrilled to see how God can use women to bring blessing. And as Ruth was in the country of Moab with her mother-in-law, Naomi, her mother-in-law had gone out with her husband and she'd gone to Moab, a foreign country, and her two sons were with her, and her husband died. And then it says that her two sons married Moabitess woman. One of them was called Orpah and one was called Ruth. And they settled there, and for 10 years they were married, and the sons died. And of course we know this story that Ruth had her two daughter-in-laws, and Naomi had her two daughter-in-laws, and she decided that she would go back. She'd heard that there was food back home in her own country. And the daughter-in-laws said, "We'll come with you." But eventually, Naomi said to them, "Please go back to your own countries." And Orpah says she lifted her voice and she cried. But Ruth said, "I'm coming with you. That your God will be my God and your people will be my people." And they made the journey back. It had been a very sad journey that day, trying to get back to her own country. She was a broken woman, Naomi. She was broken. She'd lost everything. But she had still one thing in the bank, and that was her daughter-in-law. And I tell you something, sometimes we don't realize what we have just in our hands. And Naomi had Ruth, and they went back to the country of her birth. And there, Ruth began to serve her. Ruth said to her, "I'll take care of you." And Naomi sent her to the fields to begin to glean. And it was just a miracle how she managed to get into the field of Boaz, who was a near kinsman. And the story is incredible how she went behind she went with the slave girls behind the threshers, and she picked up all the food that she could lift. And they weighed it, and then they paid her according. And it says that she found favor, and the story is incredible. But she was willing to give everything, that girl, to help her mother-in-law. And I read how she gave up her own life, really, to give herself to help her mother-in-law. She gave up her country because she had the opportunity to go home, but she decided that better her stay with her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law had probably been elderly, and she'd said that she'd no hope of having another husband. She was heartbroken. She said no longer to call her Naomi, but to call her Mara, sadness. But she was willing to work with the slave girls. She didn't think herself above anybody. Ruth was willing to work with the slave girls, and she found herself in the fields of Boaz. And Boaz took care of her, and he told her not to wander from his field in case she got into trouble, because the men would attack her. And she was an obedient girl, and I love that about Ruth. She was an obedient girl. She did exactly what she was told when she was told. Her mother-in-law gave her instruction, and she was willing to do exactly as her mother-in-law said. Not often people are willing to do what their mother-in-law said. She was honest. She told Boaz the truth of that she was there to serve her mother-in-law, and that she was willing to do anything to keep her mother-in-law whole. But her mother-in-law had a big plan for her. But God had a bigger plan, because we see the story, how it winds through the story of Jesus. Ruth brought fulfillment to Naomi. She did everything that Naomi said. She was better than a son. She was obedient. She was devoted to her mother-in-law. And I'm just so thankful today that we can find people in our lives who are devoted to us, devoted to God. We can be devoted to Him. We can find ways to serve Him. And that was what Ruth did. She found ways to serve. Naomi told her, go and lay at his feet while he's asleep. and ask him to cover you with the corner of his blanket, which was a sign that she was willing to become his wife. And we all know the story, how he had to go into the square outside the gate, and he called the elders to come to the gate. And he knew that there was a nearer kinsman than him. And he decided that he would try and buy the property of Elimelech. Although he was in the line, there was someone closer to Naomi. And he sat at the gate with the elders of the city. And he told them that, I want to make this deal. And that he got the nearer kinsman in. And I liked how he said it. He said, I think you should buy the land. And after the man had agreed to buy the land of Elimelech, that was the father-in-law of Ruth, then he added in, you have to take the Moabitess as your wife. He was keeping that card up his sleeve, you see, because he knew that probably the near kinsman was willing to take the land, but he wasn't willing to take the wife. How often, we do things and we want we're specific, we're not willing to do all of it. We'll do some of it, we'll take a sacrifice for some, but we're not willing to go all the way. But the good thing was about Boaz, he was willing to go all the way. And when the nearest kinsman backed out, he said, I can't do that. It'll maybe cost me my own property, my own land. Boaz stepped up and he said, I'll take her. And he took her and he married her, and he became the caretaker for Naomi and her family. What a wonderful story of redemption. And it happens to be that then that he went in and they had a child. And his name was called Boaz. His name was not Boaz. His name was called Obed. And do you know what Obed means? Obed means servant. And Ruth, although she herself was a servant, she gave birth to a servant called Obed, her child. And this morning, perhaps you're thinking, well, what can I do? Maybe I'm just serving away. I feel as if I'm being used. I feel as if I'm, nobody notices what I'm doing. Ruth was there and she was working away quietly. It said that she served from morning till night, quietly behind the gleaners. We can do that, and we often can feel that we're overlooked. And maybe we feel that, nobody sees what we're doing. But you see, if you have a servant's heart, God sees what you're doing. And he starts where you are, and he will cause greatness to come to you if you're willing to serve. And today, the story of Ruth really encouraged me. It allowed me to see that even when I feel overlooked, when I feel sad that maybe, I'm doing all of this for nothing, maybe nobody sees what I'm doing, but I'm serving. And the most important thing that I find, to have a servant's heart. And this morning, if whatever category you're working in, maybe you're working in a church, or maybe you're working for a family, maybe you're just working away and you're thinking, will God ever use me? Be faithful. Ruth was faithful. She was obedient. She was willing to sacrifice her family, her country. She was willing to go with a girl, a lady who couldn't provide for her. She was willing to become the breadwinner for her mother-in-law. And we too, we can give of ourselves and God can use us. Never worry about being stretched, because God is seeing how far we're willing to go to serve him. Be encouraged this morning. Be like Ruth. God can use you when you're obedient. You can't do anything when you're unwilling to change or unwilling to go the extra mile. Ruth went the extra mile. God bless you today. I pray that this week you'll be willing to go the extra mile and find that God can really use you. Thank you. God bless you.